Before we begin, the title is written in the right-hand corner of the screen. Enjoy watching. In a past life, the empire in which the girl lived was destroyed, and there was almost nothing left of it. Valeria's life was cut short once and for all. It was as if she had always felt that an unhappy fate awaited her, only she did not know how and what would happen to her. Valeria is the illegitimate daughter of an ordinary woman and an aristocrat. Unfortunately, because of their status and the nature of her birth, her mother destroyed right in her presence, and did it on purpose to not only ruin the child's life, but also the perception of this cruel world. In time, the girl learns that the death of her mom was arranged by her own father. He did it for money, put his daughter in the wrong hands, got the money, and invested it in one of his businesses. Valeria worked very hard and unbearably for 20 years. But in the end, her country was destroyed, and he had no desire or sense of purpose to live on. After just a few weeks, she couldn't stand it and died of hunger. She realized that sooner or later this would happen, so she prepared herself in advance for the end to come soon. In fact, when she had the last few minutes left, she hardly realized that she had been able to endure it and lasted so long. Except that in those very last minutes, she had a strange feeling that it wasn't over yet. Valeria wasn't as upset as she seemed to be in any case. Whatever awaited her next, it would be much better than anything that came before it. In the end, everything happened just as she felt. The girl wakes up a moment later in some unknown place in the forest and realizes that the universe has given her a new opportunity to live this life once again. After the death, she had a strange feeling that it was not a new life, but rather a return to the past to influence and correct something. Waking up, Valeria found herself right in front of the place where they said goodbye to her mother. At that moment, she realized exactly that she had traveled back in time. The girl felt that this was exactly the moment when she was about to be handed over to strangers. This means that she can understand or remember approximately what awaits her next, so she can plan and do things that will be beneficial for her. So a girl can avoid making mistakes she regrets or made in a past life without thinking. While there, she vowed that she needed to escape her horrible family and do whatever she could just to live at least a little longer than fate had destined her to live. And so it is August of the 450th year according to the imperial calendar. Today, congratulate the best graduate, Valerie, who has been one of the best. She stood there, even though in her past life the girl was born as the illegitimate child of an aristocrat, so she couldn't attend the academy. She never thought that she could become a lady of the imperial palace and wear a graduate cap, and also that on this day Josephine will have a wide smile on her face, because she, the most demanding and difficult teacher, who is constantly dissatisfied with something, she remembers that day very well. There was a lot of excitement, fear, and not knowing how her life would turn out next. Someone started to give a speech and said that student Valeria had excelled in a series of educational courses as a lady of the imperial palace and had achieved amazing results. So she was presented with a certificate of superior qualification and congratulated on her graduation. The man praised her for her efforts and reiterated that the girl had done an excellent job. He hoped she would continue to achieve the same results and be one of the best everywhere else. On the one hand, it was very pleasant, but on the other hand, she knew and felt that nothing good was in store for her. In any case, she was still grateful for such a warm and pleasant farewell. In those few minutes, the teachers had said much more pleasant words than in the long years of study, of course. She pretended to be very happy, because it would be strange to be sad at such a moment and attract unnecessary attention to herself. She was immediately applauded by other graduates. All began to rejoice for each other, because from this day, most of them have a new life, which they dreamed of all these years. They already have some plans and dreams for the next few years, and only Valeria is barely trying to smile and pretend that she also has so many plans and hopes. She even felt a little embarrassed. Everyone started to be genuinely happy for her, and she can't respond in kind. No one even noticed that she was barely holding back tears, and was even at the event at all. First of all, she needs to move to a future where the monster prince is not taken away in a carriage to the territory of an enemy country. So far, this is the only mission she has for the near future. She realized that the best thing she could do for herself and for this world as well, was to save as many people as possible and avoid what awaited them just a few years later. So far, her plan is very much like something unrealistic, which is very hard to believe. She is the only one who has the idea to save the world. And besides, the situation is so desperate that if she doesn't do it, everyone will suffer. Meanwhile, in the Imperial Garden, it's business as usual, very dark and gloomy. There's a very unpleasant atmosphere, and no wonder there are very few people here and wanting to visit this place. Now here are two men who are very tired, and for some reason can't afford to stop and rest for a few minutes. They discuss this creepy place, and are afraid that the prince monster might show up here much sooner than they expect him to. Apparently, some preparation is going on, and it will be very bad if the monster shows up before they are ready for it. Rumor has it that just by looking at the prince, a person's body begins to gradually dissolve into thin air, and eventually, the person simply dies within seconds. As soon as one of them spoke about it, the monster appeared. They both realized they were not alone, and as soon as they looked in his direction, they couldn't believe their eyes. The distance between them is less than 2. And of course, the first thing they did was to scatter and start screaming very loudly in fear. Surprisingly, the monster didn't catch up to them. He still stands in the same place and just silently watches it. But really, he's going to catch someone anyway, and he knows that no one is going to run anywhere. If you look at this prince, he is really easy to distinguish from a normal person. He has a hidden face, and his whole body is hidden under a cloak. You can see only eyes of unusual color. They seem to glow, and immediately make it clear that they belong to the monster. The prince looked as if he had been waiting for this moment for a very long time, and in any case, he intended to get what he wanted. It was believed that once he appeared, there was no chance of survival anymore. One day the prince was coming home and felt that something had happened to his mom. He started running all over the mansion looking for her, and with every step, he got worse and worse. He felt that something was wrong, and gradually he began to blame himself for it, though he had no idea if he was imagining it or not yet. When he tried to ask adults at least something, it was as if they ignored him on purpose and waited for him to see for himself. He was looking for his mom for a very long time, and every minute he was getting more and more angry at the people around him. He was not told anything just because he was a child who supposedly should not know what happened. By the look in people's eyes, it was immediately clear to him that they didn't want to upset him, and if he hadn't felt anything himself, he wouldn't have known for a very long time what was going on now. And they were trying to calm him down on purpose and telling him the wrong room so that he wouldn't find his mom for as long as possible. It's impossible to imagine how he felt at that moment. He was very much a child from whom everyone is hiding something. At that moment, he didn't care that so many people were looking at him. He wanted only one thing: to see his mother and to know how she was feeling. The boy knew that she had a serious illness, and at any moment, the woman could die. So, he rarely left her side, and wanted to be there for her at the very last moment. And since they don't tell him anything, he already imagined that mom died, and blames himself for not being there for her. At one point, he happened to notice the helpers, and thought it was likely that his mom might be behind that door they were standing near. As soon as he saw the frightened look, he immediately realized that she was right there. Of course, they tried to stop him and tell him that it would make him feel better not to see it. But the boy snuck out and said that no one had the right to stop him in such a situation. He no longer considers himself a small child, because at least morally he has long grown up despite his age. He is not afraid to accept the cruel and unpleasant truth. The prince went to his mom and could not believe his eyes. Since he was already here, the boy was told that his mom died a few minutes ago, and at that moment, he had an inexpressible feeling. He felt like a traitor, because if he'd come a few minutes earlier, he could have given her one last word and reminded her how much he loved her and would continue to love her. He wanted to be around as long as possible, but he would be deliberately discouraged and offered to go to his room. It is very strange because he has the right to do so, and no one can forbid to be here. The boy could not contain himself, cried a lot, and started to blame himself. Everyone around him tried to calm him down and said that he was not guilty of anything, because the mother's life depended only on her health and nothing else. She was no longer helped by any medicines and doctor's help. She held out as long as she could. At that moment, he didn't know if there was any sense in life and what to do next, because the only person he trusted and told everything he was worried about was dead. Now he was alone in the world and had to rely only on himself. After that, he felt as if some force was keeping him from his mother, and the boy clung to that bed and said he wasn't going anywhere. So the first thing he thought of in that second was that he had to survive anyway. And even if he wasn't strong enough, he had to create an image that would make people fear him at first sight. He decided to start as soon as he thought about it. The guy gradually began to become someone who no longer existed. He began to hide his appearance and gradually moved to the side of darkness. He wants to live in darkness and make sure that when he appears, people literally freeze in fear and pray that he doesn't hurt anyone and just walks away. In the meantime, Valeria had not yet had time to get used to her new life. When she was called again by a teacher whom she thought she would never see again, she didn't ignore her request and went to the office. She had the feeling again that she was a student who was summoned to an important conversation because of bad behavior, or on the contrary, good grades. But now, the girl realizes that she has nothing to fear in this building because she's already got a lot more problems to be afraid of. In the meantime, Valeria entered the office and asked why the woman had called her. The woman looked at her and leisurely asked her to sit down. This meeting started a little awkwardly. The girl decided that it would be better to keep quiet and wait until she was explained why she had been called to this office and how she could help her. The woman admitted that she was very happy to see her, but at the same time, she made it clear that the conversation would not be easy. She asked that the girl not be afraid. After all, it was not as bad as she thought. The woman just needed to know something. Without waiting for an explanation, Valeria saw some letters on her desk and decided to ask what they were. Finally, the woman started talking and asked the following. Is it to her knowledge that Valeria does not want to serve in the Imperial Palace? She wanted to know the reason why, if of course the girl didn't mind telling it to her. Instead of answering, the girl replied with a request. She asked to be sent to the palace of His Highness, the first prince of the... The woman was very surprised. She expected to hear the name of anyone but not a prince. She even thought it was a joke, or that the girl just didn't know who she was talking about. Of course, she could not be refused. So everyone began gradually to pack her things, to call a carriage, and to attend to the matter. And of course, at the same time, began to discourage her. They slightly hinted that the first prince is a man who, after meeting him, Valeria might regret ever wanting to see him or even go near his palace. The helpers never stopped reminding her that it was very dangerous, and each time they spoke not in hints, but in direct words, so that it would be clearer what awaited her at the meeting. It turns out that the best graduates each year were given the right to choose the direction and place where they plan to work in the future. Now, all they can do is ask if the girl knows what it means to go to the first prince's abode. In their opinion, it's likely that Valeria has no idea where she wants to go. This is the place where every person tries not to stay more than one day. Most people try not to even go near the palace. That's why they sent the girls with the most failing grades there every year. And those with good grades and learning outcomes were never sent to such a dangerous place. Valeria didn't listen to a single word. She let everything pass her by and tuned into her first meeting with the prince. She couldn't stop smiling and was looking forward to the moment when she would meet this mysterious man. Her first day of work is coming up. The girl is sure that everything will be fine because she knows what's in store for her. She can only hope that she has some sort of plan in place. She thanked for the concern and explained that from the beginning, she had approached her training in such a way that she would go to the first principal and help him at the first opportunity. And now, she was fully prepared and looking forward to that moment. With this, she upset the woman even more. She realized that no one could change her mind. They could only wish her well and hope that she would be safe there and would not regret that she had chosen such a dangerous place to work. The woman warned that she was very much against the idea and asked that the girl always remember that everyone was against it and tried to talk her out of it. In the end, she signed some kind of document that says she knows about it, and if anything, passes the responsibility on to Valeria. Lastly, she wished her well and warned that if anything went wrong, the sooner she got out of there, or at least tried to get out, the better, and supposedly she would soon see for herself. Valeria listened to all these warnings, but in the end, not changing her mind and determined to carry out her plan, she took this document and thanked them for all they had done for her. Of course, everyone thinks she made the craziest choice of her life and will regret it, but now she's free to make her own decisions and take on that responsibility. The second Prince Cao, in his past life, instead of the first prince, he took the throne of the emperor. This many people didn't like, but he only smiled and was happy when he saw the outrage of people. He destroyed the entire country in just 2 years of his rule. That's what the locals were afraid of. They realized that this ruler would do nothing good and were terrified to see what he was up to. Very interesting what this has to do with Valeria's plan. Hopefully she will try to prevent everything he intends to do in the future. The girl has promised herself that no matter how difficult it turns out to be, she has to do it and save people. It turns out that her coming back to life is the perfect opportunity to prevent him from becoming emperor. Because if that happens, the plan is a failure, and there's no telling if she'll ever get the chance again. There are literally a few hours left before the meeting, and with each passing minute, she begins to doubt her plan more and more. And this is very bad. She needs to focus and confidently meet, so that he in no way did not think that she, like everyone else, afraid of him. Valeria can't believe that some parts of the imperial palace are kept in such bad condition. She even started to doubt that she might have gotten the wrong road and come to the wrong place. Everywhere is very dirty. There is no order, and it seems that even the air is saturated with something evil and dirty. There is a lot of dust everywhere, and even on the trees, there is not a single leaf. It's a really dark place that hints that there's no need to go any further, and it could be very dangerous, but there's no stopping the girl now. She started to look around to see if anyone was following her or trying to approach her. Valeria already knew what to expect, so she tried not to make a single mistake. Surprisingly, she is calm and not nervous at all. The girl gradually goes further and further away and realizes that there is no going back anymore. At some point, she stopped and began to remember what she remembered from the future. Because before, everything was very different here. It was not so gloomy. So, the girl hardly recognized this place. She expected to see something brighter and more comfortable. The prince here once shone very brightly, but now he spends his life in such a cramped place, while holding the title of Prince of the Monster. With each step, Valeria realizes that once she has decided to do it, she must go all the way, and do her best not to be afraid, and not to want to go back just a few hours later. She realizes that you can't give in to your emotions. You have to continue to stay calm, at least as long as you can. Since she decided to be so bold, she ventured into the house unannounced, and the first thing she noticed was that it was as dark as the courtyard. She immediately wondered what the maids were doing here, and if there were any at all, when suddenly, she hears a man's voice that starts to thank her for the long and very difficult journey. Valeria tried her best to react calmly, and not to show that she was very scared. This is Evan, a high-ranking duke and aide to the first prince. He met the girl quite normally, while remaining reserved and talking without too much emotion. He looks cruel but still remains the favorite of all the girls. Valeria smiled and said it was a pleasure to meet him, and then wanted to introduce herself. But he wouldn't let her and said that this palace doesn't need a lady. He did not remain polite, and asked her to return immediately to where she had come from. Is he going to fire her on her first day of work and not even give her a chance to show what she can do? It is usually customary to give her a few trial days and then make a conclusion and fire her if someone doesn't like it. The girl was not afraid. She replied that as a man who had received an official order, it was the right of the first principal directly, and no one but him, to dismiss her. She's not ready to make that decision until an example of a reason is given. The guy obviously didn't expect that answer, and judging by his behavior, he doesn't even know what to say to it. After a few moments, he asked her to refrain from unnecessary remarks, and then, explaining that he was only conveying to her the words and decision of His Highnesses, he asked her to leave again before anyone got angry and made her do it. The girl wouldn't leave, and asked him to explain something again. Not to waste any time or drag this conversation on for hours longer, she asked only one thing, to tell His Highness to keep the promise he had made 8 years before. The guy looked at her and wondered a bit. He didn't immediately understand what she was talking about, and immediately wanted to know what this stranger meant. He doesn't remember her at all, and doesn't understand what His Majesty could have promised her. She is so sure of it. She said it, very curious as to what promise she is talking about. About 8 years ago, 432nd year, this incident occurred when she was employed as a servant to a certain aristocrats. She remembered this period of her life very well, because it was the first job, which was not as easy as the girl imagined, because of it was always very many people and had to quickly do everything that they say. At some point, she was pushed very hard by adults because they did not notice her in the crowd. The girl fell and did not notice how she could not hold the plate with fruit. She did not even pay attention to the pain and began to think that she will be for this. What punishment will be? All the fruit is on the floor, and if someone finds out about it, there will be very big problems because the others have already had it. They were seriously penalized, and some even fired. Just as she started picking up all those apples from the floor and thinking how to explain everything to her boss, a strange guy came up to her and asked if everything was okay. He had noticed her from afar, and somehow, despite the fact that she was an ordinary girl, she managed to interest him even then. Valeria guessed who he could be, but she was afraid to imagine that a man from the imperial family could suddenly come up and help an ordinary girl. The guy looked at her and sincerely wanted to do something, just so she wouldn't worry and everything would be all right. He asked if she could stand up and looked with eyes so kind that she wanted to stare into them forever, at least as long as possible. And just a few minutes later, she recognized him by his shiny blonde hair, shining like stars in the night sky, shiny snow-white skin, emerald-colored eyes. Valeria immediately could not believe that he was only a few years older than her, because his face is very beautiful. The prince, the eldest monster, during the destruction of the empire, was captured by enemies and taken to his country. Durek Christian Castelzum. Absolutely everyone knows about him, even those who live in other countries. Valeria wondered if her previous life was really just a dream. His mother, Empress Abella, was poisoned. It made him become a monster prince for the rest of his life. Up to this point, all her memories have been subconscious. She got fed up with Anaston's family and ran away, not even knowing what would happen in the future. But the principal is handsome, very intelligent, has good political convictions, excellent martial arts skills, and of course is loved by the whole world. Valeria doesn't want the man she admires and is so proud of to go down the same tragic path as in her past life. Meanwhile, one of the assistants calls out to the prince and reminds him that they already have a lot to do, so no time to be distracted by anything else. Valeria has an idea that perhaps fate itself presented her with a meeting with him. She does not want everything to repeat the same as in the past life. So, at the very last moment, just as he started to leave on business, the girl asked him to stay for a few seconds because she wanted to say something to him in farewell. The guy looked at her carefully and promised that he would only stay for a few minutes if it was really something very important. She started talking about him becoming emperor one day, and strangely enough, the girl started saying it as if she was ordering him to do it. Maybe she was just nervous and didn't quite understand how it looked from the outside. At that moment, the guy kept looking at her with a look as if he didn't understand a single word. He didn't understand what it was and how to react to it. It turns out Valeria only wants to hear him confirm and make it clear that he does indeed aspire to be emperor in the future. The girl gets even more angry because he doesn't answer anything. But even more, she doesn't like the fact that maybe he won't like the question, and he will also get very angry and ask her not to approach him at all anymore. In the end, at first the boy laughed, and then, with a smile, promised that he would do it, although he hadn't really wanted to become emperor before, and had never thought about it at all. That he had promised it to the first girl he met, and hadn't thought about what she needed it for. Valeria heard what she wanted to hear and even calmed down a little. She felt as if she had accomplished a very important mission and got what she wanted. Eventually, he stroked her head, and asked if that was all she had stopped him for, and asked him to stick around. The girl admitted that it was, but explained that it was very important to her. Supposedly, she wanted very much to see him as the future emperor. The guy promised that he would try to remember her and her name. He smiled again and said that it was nice to meet her, and he noticed that for some reason she was different from the others, and there was something special about her. Maybe he felt that they would definitely meet again in the future. Then he went off on his own and explained that if he had the chance he would have talked to her some more, but unfortunately he didn't. It was a very strange feeling, as if Valeria was in a dream. It had been a long time since she had felt such warm feelings and emotions after talking to a person. In the meantime, the assistant would agree to take her into the study, for he was curious to know what promise Mr. Prince might have made to her. Valeria knew he couldn't refuse. She had succeeded in intriguing him and making him want to know what she was talking about. If she, who had seen the worst of the future, could become a close ally of a man from the imperial family, she could prevent the second prince who had destroyed the country from becoming emperor. If the girl told someone about what would happen in the future, which she saw, everyone would only laugh at her and would not take these words seriously. So, it is necessary to act in a different way. She is sure that the terrible future is quite real if she can prevent it. It will be a real miracle. For now, she plans to stop the enemies and make sure they can't take the prince back to her country. No matter how difficult that turns out to be, she has to pull it off. Before entering the office, the aide stopped her and decided to warn her that any rash actions were forbidden. She should think carefully before saying anything, and especially coming close to her. Valeria promised that everything will be fine, and she herself understands it perfectly well. So the assistant cannot worry and not be nervous. After he warned her, the guy knocked on the door and made a special sound to let her know it was him. Mr. allowed to enter. One can only hope that he is in a good mood today, and that at least he will not kick out Valeria in the first minutes of the conversation. She should have time to remind him who she is, and that before they even talk to him, she is a very important topic. Assistant introduced the guest, and then the girl called her name and said that she was appointed as His Highness's new lady. The prince looked at her as if he had perceived her as an enemy from the first seconds, though perhaps it was his usual look that meant nothing. As expected, the first thing the guy said was that he'd hate to upset the girl, but he didn't need any helpers other than his only assistant, Evan. Black mask and dark cloak. People say he hides his appearance because he was cursed by wizards and turned into a monster. So, he doesn't want anyone to see and be scared of his appearance. Everyone thinks that if they hear his voice, they'll have a horrible experience and eventually have no chance of surviving. According to the girl, all these rumors are completely untrue. His best friend assistant worked with him, who has heard his voice for 10 years and nothing happened to him. At one point, the prince didn't want to talk further and ordered her to leave this office immediately. Supposedly now, there was nothing to talk about. The girl didn't listen to him and decided to stay. The guy was surprised and asked her to explain why she was so brave, and didn't listen to him the first time around. Valeria couldn't help herself and asked how he could fire her on her first day of work. She said it was very unfair. After all, she had studied for this almost her whole life and waited for this day as something special. She pretended it was her dream. After that, she began with the main thing. The girl asked if he could forget her, because he had promised that it would never happen, and said he would look forward to it. But it seemed that someone hadn't kept his word and had forgotten about his promise. The prince refuses to believe he promised anyone anything. Valeria got angry and started reminding him everything in detail so that he would definitely remember her and his words that he said 8 years ago. She wasn't afraid and moved even closer to him. The girl started yelling at him as if they had switched places, and she had the right to do so. Very curious how the prince would react to this, and if he would get even angrier. To make sure he remembered and said something, she started repeating what she had just said. She had no other options. She had no intention of leaving here. She had to get the job anyway and do what was planned. At this moment, she didn't think about the fact that she promised to talk and behave as carefully as possible. But it was too late. She had already done something that many princes seriously punish. It remained that after these words, he would take pity on her and wouldn't do that. Surprisingly, so far, he's completely calm. The guy could have gotten angry a long time ago and ordered her kicked out of here or done the usual, punish her for this behavior and make her either die or really regret coming into this office at all. The prince replied that he really didn't remember anything and had no idea if they were acquaintances or not. He asked to leave this office, and surprisingly, in a completely calm voice, it seems that he was just afraid of her shouting, although he is a prince and no one has the right to shout at him, especially to demand something and ignore his orders. After some time, Valeria calmed down and offered to talk calmly. She asked the guy to look her in the eyes and admitted that she has always admired him and is a huge fan of him. But now she is very offended that he really forgot about his promise and cannot remember her. She even thought that perhaps he is trying to deceive or pretend. The girl has long ago told everything, every detail and moment from that meeting. She believes that after such a thing, it is impossible not to remember anything. Accordingly, she sincerely believes that he does not want to confess something. At one point, just after saying that, he grabbed his head and said he was remembering something. It looked a bit weird and funny, but luckily some progress was being made. I really wonder what he thinks about it and how he'll feel about her after he realizes she's the same girl he liked as a kid, because just now he wanted to kick her out and wouldn't give her any chance to stay. At one point, Valeria took another risk and allowed herself to say that she did not want to hear any excuses. So she asked him to tell her if he would fulfill his promise, and then suggested to get straight to the point. She means the debut, for which she proposes to prepare with her. The guy obviously didn't expect something like this, especially today. He had forgotten the last time he was afraid to answer something, even to a girl he didn't know, because usually for such behavior, everyone is seriously punished. Valeria reminded him that in 2 months he will be 20 years old, so given that usually the debut of children of special persons is understood from 17 to 20, so the guy is a little late, and it should be dealt with as soon as possible. She provided him with some documents and seemed to make him nervous. The prince felt too awkward, like he was very much at fault and didn't know how to get out of this situation. In that case, she decided to calm him down and told him that if they start preparing right now, they will definitely make it in time. In response, he asked why he should listen to her and why he should help her. He is a monster prince who can be expected to do anything. Even his personal assistant is sometimes afraid to go into the office because he does not know how the next conversation may end up. He also doesn't understand how he's going to get stages. He barely thought about it before and doesn't seem to want to think about it now either. At this point, something unexpected happened. The girl thought that he would feel guilty and try to keep his promise. But in the end, the prince begins to apologize for such a rash promise and asks that Valeria pretend that nothing of the sort happened and they do not know each other at all. Afterwards, she asked him to tell her honestly whether he had really been cursed by black magic, for she could scarcely believe it now. She moved even closer to him and forced him to confess everything, really wondering how he would react and if he would tell the truth. After all, in this office is not only Valeria, but also the assistant, who knows him almost all his life. The girl again repeated her question and asked to answer as honestly as possible. Otherwise, she will not go anywhere and will stay here until she hears the answer. The rumors about the first prince spread rather quickly, the moment his life started to deteriorate and get worse by the day. Literally everyone was talking about his mother and spreading untrue rumors as if he had something to do with it. If you look directly into his eyes, it is believed that this person will be very bad. He will be tormented for the rest of his life. Many even tried to get rid of him and make to lock him up in a safe place. Most of all, people were afraid to hear his voice. They thought that after that, something really terrible will happen. Of course, there were those who never believed it, because they realized that there was never a single instance of anyone actually seeing it happen. Meanwhile, Valeria does not give up and continues to learn the truth from him. It is very strange that the prince does not get angry and does not answer her as he usually does. Is it really? He is just afraid that the girl will tell the truth that few people know about? For the sake of the experiment, she deliberately looked him directly in the eyes and tried to get as close as possible, because that way it would be clear whether it was true or not. She looked at him for more than a few minutes. But, as expected, nothing happened. The guy is still silent and doesn't say anything. He's trying to hide his real reaction. But it seems there's really no point in hiding anything anymore. She's already figured it out and has already been convinced of her assumptions more than once. Valeria said that judging by the fact that nothing terrible had happened to her, it didn't look like he was cursed with dark magic at all. She thought that after something like that, he should definitely say something and start making excuses for himself. After that, she suddenly began to apologize for her disrespect, and in her defense she decided to say that her purpose was to find out if he was really cursed or if it was just a rumor. The guy didn't stay quiet and asked what she wanted from him and what he could do to get her to leave this office and not demand something else from him. Valeria said that she is only interested in one thing. She wants him to become emperor and do everything possible to prevent someone else from taking that place. And of course, she would be happy to help him do that. The reason why she wants it so badly is quite obvious. She wants the man she so sincerely admires to become the most respected man in the country. That is, the emperor. And besides, if he doesn't become emperor, things will get worse. The world and the country will end. But she can't say that yet. Valeria has seen the future and knows that their country will only be destroyed. Many innocent people will die. And unfortunately, all this is inevitable. Unless, of course, he can be taken to an enemy country and become emperor. So it's up to him now. He doesn't know what his choice means yet. Hopefully he'll trust her and do what's best for everyone. She really wants to repeat everything that is to be repeated from the future. The girl has experienced terrible sensations and wants to do everything possible not to experience these sensations again. In fact, so far, everything is not as terrible and scary as it may seem at first glance. The girl knows what to do, but first she must hear that he is ready to become emperor. Without that, nothing will work out. Her plan is as follows. Firstly, she will introduce him to everyone on his 20th birthday, which will be in 2 months, because debuting as a person from the imperial family means becoming the heir to the imperial throne. And also, you have to do it before the second prince. Otherwise, everything will be lost. Secondly, we need to choose people who became famous in her previous life and introduce them to Durek. If the aristocrats support him, his right as the first heir to the throne will remain intact. The fact is that the strength of bonds that are formed throughout life are very important in this world, so the sooner they are in place, the better. Thirdly, meeting and marrying his future spouse at the same time as the emperor is restored to the throne, he must in any case find a partner, and it is desirable to do it as soon as possible. And fourthly, the last point remains, her retirement. Valeria plans to use all the money she has earned to build a 2-story mansion on the coast and enjoy spending time in a cozy and comfortable home. Simply put, her whole strategy is to make the prince an emperor, save the country, and of course, to ensure her happy future life, and wants to enjoy life in a peaceful country, which is not threatened by anything bad. In fact, all this is quite possible to realize, because the assistant of the prince receives a fairly high salary, and if everything goes according to plan, all this will be realized in just a few months. In the meantime, the girl managed to get the job, and today is her first day on the job. So far, she has an assistant helping her with everything and telling her what her job is all about. Valeria memorizes everything very well. She is even good at handling documents, something even she didn't expect from herself. Her new colleague, although he doesn't show it, is actually very happy, because he has half as much work and someone to talk to in his spare time. He used to be very bored, but now they talk all the time, and work is not as boring as it used to be. They work well together. Everything is going even better than she imagined. Surprisingly, the guy doesn't even try to mess with her or make Valeria do something wrong. On the contrary, he explains everything very well and prompts. He tries to be always there to help and correct mistakes in case of anything. He's trying to maintain the image he created originally, supposedly not entirely happy that she came here at all, because he was doing quite well on his own, without anyone else's help. He even allowed her to work in his office and asked her which side of the table was more comfortable for her. But he himself positioned himself where there was less light. The girl notices all this and realizes that no matter how he tries to look indifferent, she still sees his good character and appreciates his help. Sometimes when the girl leaves the office for some business, she does not hold back and barely tries to hold back her tears. She cannot believe that everything worked out. Besides, she saw the princess is not as scary as he is considered to be. Besides, she got a wonderful colleague who treats her well. Initially, though she was really confident, she allowed for the possibility that it wouldn't work out, and imagined that the chance that she might still die was small, but still there. It turns out that all good things come suddenly, exactly at the moment when one is not expecting them at all. Before the death of his mother 8 years ago, Durek was always dreaming, planning, and hoping for a happy future. But things didn't happen the way he thought they would. At a young age, he had to grow up very early and realize how the world works. Despite the fact that people were always trying to hurt him more and do something bad to him, he endured it all, and eventually became a person who is not afraid of anything or anyone. The only good thing that had happened since that moment was that he had grown up and learned what independent life was. He had stopped waiting for help from anyone and began to rely only on himself. He was well aware that after the death of his mother, there were too many who wanted to prevent him from becoming emperor and further spoil his life, which already had little good left in it. It was as if Valeria sensed that he needed his help, because even though he already had an assistant, she knew better what needed to be done and understood what he really needed. She wants to give him not only help in his work and help him become an emperor, she wants to make him start to see something good in his life and stop remembering the terrible past. Of course, nothing can be fixed, but constantly sad and remember the bad. It is not the best way out of the situation. The girl knows it like no one else. In fact, he's very lucky to have Valeria in his life. Unlike him, she has not stopped and is trying to do something. Now she cares not only about herself, but also about him. Of course, the guy already realizes that other people also have problems, and he is not the only one who feels very bad. There are those who have lost many more loved ones, and those who have managed to come to terms with it. In fact, since there is no turning back time, the best thing to do in this situation is to get back to normal as soon as possible and try to move on with your life, no matter how hard it may be. In the meantime, the prince was visited by his assistant. He was very interested in talking about a very interesting subject, namely, what he was going to do next and what he thought of Valeria. Mr. admitted that he was not prepared for such a meeting, but in fact, after her appearance, he was even a little relieved. He felt supported by her and began to hope that she could do something about it. He has no idea what she's going to do, and because of that, he's even more interested in watching it. Right now, he's not interested in why she's helping a stranger. The main thing for him is to make sure she's doing it sincerely and really only came to help him out. The only thing he couldn't stop thinking about was whether he should do anything, because the girl hadn't said anything of the sort. She'd only wanted his assent, and as soon as she'd gotten what she wanted, she'd said goodbye and gone into the office. For now, he doesn't plan to ask her a lot of questions, because he realizes that she has a lot on her plate, and because of that, there's no time for conversations that won't do any good. He decided that when she wants to, she'll tell and explain everything in detail. He doesn't even know what's better, sitting in his office trying to figure things out or trying to relax and stop thinking about bad things. Since she's willing to take on all his problems, it turns out he's got a lot of time on his hands now and can finally try to get some rest. Or at least stay out of the office for a few days, unless there's a lot to do. At some point, he got tired of thinking about it and trying to find out the answers, knowing it was pointless. He doesn't have the strength to think about everything at once. He had a lot of problems before, and now Valeria has come along and filled his mind. The principal took his head, and wanting some alone time, he hinted to the aide to leave either to rest or to the office. The lad understood at once, and said that if the gentleman needed his help, he would be glad to do what was necessary, and then, wishing him a good evening, went off on his own business. At this point, the prince allowed him to rest and asked him not to do any work and just go to his room, because he realizes that he is not the only one who is tired because the day was too busy. You need to rest properly and gain strength for the next day. Left alone, The guy wondered if he would be able to show up in front of a lot of people, because usually he never showed up to the event, and specifically avoided people. He thinks that people will either laugh at him and spread some rumors, or they will be very frightened and scatter around, thereby ruining the event just because he is not like everyone else. He regretted several times that he agreed to fulfill his promise and said he would go to the event. He can't even imagine that there is such a possibility that everything will go smoothly and he will feel comfortable at the nearest event. The guy looked out the window and thought that, in any case, if he wanted a happy future, he had to try to do at least something to avoid blaming himself and others later. He even perceived Valeria as a bright ray of light, slowly filling his life with new meaning. Sounds beautiful, but does he really begin to trust her and sees her as the only chance to look at this life differently and make it at least a little bit like it was before? Meanwhile, the next day came. Valeria could hardly wake up and open her eyes. She could not sleep because she was constantly thinking about what happened yesterday. She still had worries that have not disappeared, though really, it's okay now. She's done her plan from yesterday, and it went even better than she expected. Now she needs to somehow wake up, eat breakfast, and get herself in shape for an equally important day as yesterday. It was only 7 o'clock in the morning. Usually she was used to waking up much later, but now, since she had a lot of responsibilities, there was no way to sleep longer than that. In the end, she did manage to pull herself together. She even promised herself that she would try to get used to the new schedule, and began to hope that it wouldn't be a problem later on. Valeria went for a walk in the garden to have a better look at the area and to understand what is where. She noticed that everywhere is very clean, and it seems that thanks to the fact that we have walkers here, for some reason, she feels better. There is a very pleasant floral aroma and atmosphere, from which you do not want to go anywhere. This place is very different from the mansion where the prince lives. It's very strange that the garden is constantly being cleaned up and trying to make the place beautiful, and the mansion itself was abandoned a very long time ago. It's like someone is purposely not doing anything with it and leaving it as it is. It's not even pleasant to look at. You get the impression that it's an abandoned building that no one has lived in for more than 10 or even 20 years. She begins to resent the fact that in order to walk somewhere, you have to go far into the garden, because near the mansion is simply impossible to be. Looking at this place, do not want to do anything and spoils the mood even more. Very interesting what she's going to do with it. Valeria looks at it like she's already planned something, really. She felt like a hostess just a day later and wants to make some changes. After that, she went inside and was even more upset. There was so much dust around that it was hard to breathe, and she wanted to go outside again. It turns out that from the street, you want to go home, but from here, you want to go outside. Looks like a hopeless situation. How much time and effort is needed to change this mansion? Who unrecognizable, and make it so that it would be pleasant and comfortable to be here? There seemed to be so much dust, not even outside. She felt that she was not in a mansion from the prince, but in some horrible place where they knew nothing about order and cleanliness. At some point, the girl suddenly saw the maids. She was very surprised that they were here at all, and at that moment, she had a lot of questions. They started laughing, although in fact, it would be better if they were doing their work. They don't even hide it. What made them laugh is Valeria's behavior, namely that she is surprised by the huge amount of dust and the mess. Are they not ashamed that at the end of their shift, the mansion is a mess, nowhere is cleaned? It seems that for all these years, they have done nothing, and also laughing instead of doing something. Doesn't the prince in any way monitor their work and doesn't know what cleanliness should look like? It's strange that he didn't fire these maids and try to find those who do their job responsibly. Valeria looked at them as if she wanted to order them to do something. In fact, she has a great desire to yell and remind them that they are at work now. But she seems to be thinking about the best thing to do so that she doesn't get in trouble later on. So far, she just listens to all this talk and pretends that everything is fine. At the same time, they also start to ignore and talk about their own things, while laughing and glancing slightly in her direction. At some point, the girl didn't hold back and decided to influence this situation. Also, she noticed that they didn't have a head maid to make sure everyone did their work and didn't rest until the mansion was in order. Valeria came closer to them and asked what they were doing during working hours. She showed them a huge layer of dust and hinted that if they didn't react right away, they would be sorry, and would talk to the prince instead of her. The first thing they did was look at her like she was the enemy, and then they wondered who she was to tell her what to do. The girl replied that she was the new lady of this house, who had received direct orders from the imperial family to oversee and work in this house. She wondered if none of them had been told about this, but anyway, it didn't matter anymore. Now they wouldn't have as much time to laugh and do anything but work. Valerie decided that she would scrutinize and check every day what each of them had done. They still started to stand their ground and hinted that the girl has nothing to do with them and cannot tell them what to do. Unfortunately, they do not realize that with such a reaction, they make it worse for themselves. At first, the girl just listened to everything they had to say and decided that if they did not respect her from the beginning, she would not treat them well either, let alone give them any bonuses and extra days off. It's their own fault for being disrespectful and daring to laugh at how the girl reacted to the horrible mess in the house. Very strange. But the maids were not afraid to speak very rudely, and to hint that they would never listen to her, even if ordered to do so by the master himself. Valeria didn't stand for it and decided to start by saying that she would no longer allow any of them to treat her like that. She approached her normally, but since no one tried to say hello normally, it was their own fault. The girl did not hold back and began to shout very loudly, all at once quieted down and began to obey her. Even so, the maid, who refused and was rude the most. When a new elder comes to the palace, it is the senior maid who has to teach the junior staff everything. So the question arises whether there was once a senior maid here, and why she did not fulfill her duties. Apparently, none of these maids have any idea who is in charge of what, who is supposed to dust, who is supposed to make sure the furniture is clean, and so on. In the end, by some miracle, she managed to see a senior maid, and the first thing she did was to tell her how disrespectful her subordinates were treating her. She asked if it was normal, to which the woman replied that it had been a long time since they had a real lady, so everyone had forgotten how they should treat those who were higher in status. Valeria realized that it was useless to talk about it. She asked only one thing, that the senior maid should fix this problem and make sure that everyone has their own responsibilities that should be monitored absolutely every day, with no exceptions. Plus, she decided that she would personally walk through the mansion in the evening and look for dirty spots that someone had missed or purposely not cleaned up. Of course, the senior maid began to justify her subordinates, but in the end, still promised that he would try to perform his duties and do as Valeria asks. The woman understands that this is the right thing to do and apologized for the situation. Actually, everyone is well aware that everyone has their own responsibilities and the maid is really wrong. Instead of working, they gather on the first floor and do nothing. If this is still somehow understandable, but the fact that the prince promises no attention to order and does not notice this mess is very strange. Doesn't he go anywhere but his office and never see what's going on in the next room? In the meantime, Valeria warned that if she doesn't see any changes and results, they will have a very serious conversation, and maybe someone will be fired, so she is giving them only a week. In my opinion, that should be enough time to make this mansion a home that is pleasant to be in. She doesn't even know how to describe her surprise because the mansion doesn't even have lights. She remembers that as soon as she entered the place, she thought that no one lived here. And also, just a few minutes ago, when she saw the maids, she was equally surprised because if they are here, the question arises, why is there no order? To make it clearer to everyone what could happen if no one performed their duties, she began to remind them of the rules, which clearly state that if someone does not fully or very poorly perform their job, should be fired on the first day it is discovered. Accordingly, at any moment, Valeria can make each of them lose their jobs, at least because they laughed at her and tried to be rude to her more than once. A senior maid immediately started apologizing to her. She was the first to go up. What kind of problems everyone can face and how serious it all is. The girl advised that if they want to continue working, they should not neglect their duties and do their job honestly. Also, The girl asked the head maid to make her subordinates responsible for their behavior. She will come back soon and check whether it was done or not. No wonder that now no one even thinks to laugh. And instead of continuing to be rude, everyone is trying to fix the situation and make sure no one fires them. Even though Valeria could have done it a long time ago, she decided to feel sorry for them. She at the same time warned that if no one corrected themselves and if she saw no result, she would say goodbye to each of them and look for new personnel. She was well understood and even promised to do everything in the best way. Valeria did not believe it and warned that tonight she would check everything. If she found even one dirty corner, everyone would be punished. Unfortunately, this is the only method to get the mansion clean. Otherwise, there is no way to make them do their job, for which they are handsomely remunerated. The girl decided that if she didn't keep an eye on it, she would take care of it. Throughout the day, she would add a few chores as well, like replacing all the curtains and tidying up around the house. She asked that it be done by the end of the day. Since this palace belongs to His Highness the First Prince, the future ruler of this empire, keeping it in such a state is simply unacceptable, a violation of the rules and more. In the end, everyone understood and promised that they would do everything. Everyone scattered around to do what Valeria told them to do as soon as possible. The girl looked at them with a smile and was happy that she had succeeded. She is very happy that she has started solving problems, although in fact, she was initially sure that nothing would work out. She did it only because she made a confident appearance and did not let her abilities be doubted. Because if the girl was scared and wouldn't talk to them, nothing would change. Nobody would take her seriously, and even less would do what she asked. It would not be surprising if from this day on, any request she made would be fulfilled literally soon. For even now, order was beginning to appear so quickly that she had not expected it. It turned out that maids knew how to put things in order. All this time, they were just taking advantage of the situation and resting as long as possible. Of course, the first thing the maids did was to clean up Valerie's office. The girl thanked them for that, but she made it clear that to fix the situation, they would have to try very hard. And if they wanted to regain trust and earn a good relationship with themselves, they would have to try very hard because just cleaning up once is not enough. Valeria didn't want to answer the door. She had a lot of work to do, but she decided to answer it and let them in. It turned out the head maid wanted to talk to her. She asked if she had any free time and promised it wouldn't take long. The woman smiled at first and then started acting like she was the one who allowed her into her office. The woman called her subordinates over and asked them to do something. Valeria started to ask questions, but the older maid just ignored her. She pretended she hadn't heard anything at all, though in fact she was clearly up to something. The woman started ordering everyone to remove the extra cobwebs and hang new curtains. It's all very strange because no one is paying attention to Valeria now. They didn't even ask if they could do it. The girl doesn't know how to react to it. Besides, she has to work, and the woman promised it wouldn't take long. And there are already many people in her office. Now it looks as if the woman has learned something and can now afford to behave like that. For not so long ago, she was afraid to say a word. And now she behaves almost like a mistress. She even stopped smiling, and judging by her look, the girl didn't know what to expect. She tensed up and thought she was about to find out something not so good. It turns out that she came to ask for the return of one of the maids that the girl fired in the beginning. Only I wonder why she does it as if she wants to order and is sure that Valeria will definitely return her.